If you've ever seen the movie The Imitation Game, you've probably heard the claim that cracking Germany's Enigma code was maybe the single most important moment of the entire Second World War. But is that really true? Okay, let's dive in and try to separate the Hollywood legend from the historical reality. You remember this line, right? It's right at the end of the film. And it's such a powerful statement. It suggests that the code breakers at Bletchley Park didn't just help, they literally saved millions of lives by bringing the war to an early end. It's a claim that's pretty much shaped our entire understanding of this secret intellectual war.
But this is the explainer, so we have to ask the obvious questions. Which historians? What's the actual evidence? And can you really put a number on something like that? To get to the bottom of it, we first have to understand just how monumental this challenge really was.
You know, the funny thing is, the Enigma machine wasn't even originally designed for war. It was made for businessmen to protect commercial secrets. But the German military, well, they saw its potential and ramped it up, believing it created this mathematically unbreakable shield around all their communications.
I mean, just look at that number, 150 quintillion. That's how many possible ways the Enigma machine could be set up on any given day. It wasn't just a code, it was a mathematical nightmare. The Germans were totally convinced that even if you managed to capture a machine, you could never, ever check that many combinations before the settings changed again at midnight. So how did this thing even work? Well, an operator would type a letter. An electrical signal would then zip through a series of 3, sometimes 5, rotating wheels called rotors. From there, it went through a plugboard, kind of like an old telephone switchboard, for another layer of scrambling, before finally lighting up a completely different letter. And here's the genius part. Every single time a letter was pressed, the rotors moved, which changed the entire encryption path. So typing A twice would give you 2 totally different letters. With all those settings, the rotors, the plugboard, changing every single day, the German high command was just utterly confident. To them, Enigma wasn't just secure, it was invincible. But they were wrong.
So who were these people who dared to take on this supposedly impossible task? Now, the story most of us know centers on Bletchley Park in England, but the breakthrough, it actually started years earlier in a completely different country.
Now here's a part of the story that is so often overlooked. The very first crack in the Enigma code happened years before Bletchley Park even got started. Back in the 1930s, 3 brilliant Polish mathematicians did the impossible. They reverse-engineered an Enigma machine using smuggled documents and just pure mathematical genius. And then, just weeks before the invasion of Poland, they handed over everything, and I mean everything, including 2 replica Enigma machines to the British. So Alan Turing and his team didn't start from scratch. They were standing on the shoulders of these Polish pioneers.
With that incredible head start, the British set up their top-secret operation at Bletchley Park. But they didn't just recruit military officers. No, they put together what they called a strange collection of minds. They famously even put a cryptic crossword puzzle in the Daily Telegraph to find people who could think outside the box. 5 people solved it in under 12 minutes, and sure enough, a few weeks later, they get this mysterious letter inviting them to do some secret war work.
Now, the machines they built, like Alan Turing's bomb bay, were absolutely crucial for testing combinations at high speed. But the real breakthroughs, they came from human intuition. The codebreakers figured out that humans are creatures of habit. They knew German operators would use predictable words like Wetter for the daily weather report, or ironically end their messages with Heil Hitler. These predictable little phrases, which they called cribs, gave them a toehold. It was a known piece of text they could use to figure out the machine's daily settings.
Okay, so once they were in, the intelligence that started flowing out of Bletchley Park, which was codenamed Ultra, began to have this huge, tangible, war-altering effect on multiple fronts.
During the Battle of Britain, Ultra gave the RAF an almost perfect picture of the Luftwaffe's attack plans, letting them save their precious few fighters. In the absolutely critical Battle of the Atlantic, the capture of a German U-boat in 1941 gave them the code books they needed to finally track the submarine wolf packs that were starving Britain. And in North Africa, they were basically reading General Rommel's mail, learning his battle plans and supply routes almost as fast as his own commanders did.
So, this brings us right back to our original question. That 2-year estimate from the movie, it comes directly from this man, Harry Hinsley. He wasn't just some random historian. He was a veteran of Bletchley Park, who later wrote the official history of British intelligence during the war. His argument was pretty simple. Without Ultra, the Battle of the Atlantic would have been lost, which would have delayed D-Day for years.
Hinsley's claim feels really compelling. I mean, the guy was there. But a lot of historians argue that putting a precise number on it is basically impossible, because it drags you into the very tricky world of the what if. This is what's known as counterfactual history. You're essentially studying alternate universes. What if this one thing hadn't happened? And while it's a fascinating thought experiment, it is almost impossible to prove. How can you say for certain that if event A didn't happen, event B would have? That's the core of this whole debate.
So you really have two main camps. On one side, you have the insider view from people like Hensley. Ultra was the game changer. On the other side, you have skeptics, like the very prominent historian David Kahn, who argued that, in the end, the war was won by industrial might and sheer manpower, which makes intelligence a secondary factor.
And in this actual declassified NSA document, you can see Kahn making his case. He says, and I'm quoting here, "I believe that even if we had had the worst intelligence and the Germans the best, we would still have defeated them." For Kahn, the war ultimately came down to things you can count: more tanks, more planes, more soldiers, and the overwhelming industrial power of the United States. In that view, Ultra was helpful for sure, but it wasn't the deciding ingredient.
And this really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Hensley's 2-year claim is an estimate built on a whole chain of what-ifs. It's an educated guess, sure, but it's still a guess. It just feels a little arbitrary to say you can measure time that was saved.
So, where does that leave us? Was the movie right? Well, like with most things in history, the real answer is, it's complicated, but we can land on a few undeniable truths. So what can we say for sure? First, what happened at Bletchley Park was a staggering, unprecedented intellectual achievement. The ultra-intelligence they produced gave the Allies a massive, direct advantage in so many pivotal moments. It absolutely saved countless lives, soldiers, sailors, and civilians, by giving them the enemy's playbook. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, an essential piece of the Allied victory.
So here's the bottom line. The movie's claim of 2 years is an attempt to put a number on the unquantifiable. It's a historical what-if, but the monumental, life-saving, and war-altering impact of cracking the Enigma, that is not a what-if. That is a historical fact. You know, the entire story of Bletchley Park was kept top secret for 30 years after the war was over. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other secret victories or hidden turning points are still out there, just waiting in a classified file somewhere to completely change how we see the past?